All right, ready to dive deep into a family that makes the Borgias, well, look like amateurs.
Oh, wow, that's a bold statement.
It is. But today, we're tackling the House of Guise.
Ah, yes. A French noble family during the 16th century, they wielded power, oh, you wouldn't believe.
Power that rivaled the monarchy itself.
Exactly.
So was their ambition their downfall? Or was that just how the game was played back then?
That's the question, isn't it? It's fascinating how entangled they became with the French power structure. Masters, truly masters, had using marriages and alliances to position themselves at the heart of the court.
They didn't just sit around waiting for things to happen.
Mhm.
Take Claude, the Duke of Guise, for instance,
Oh, an excellent example. Close friends with King Francis I.
and married to Antoinette de Bourbon, the king's cousin.
A pivotal move. That marriage secured their influence just by being close to the throne. And when Francis I became king, well, Claude was rewarded handsomely,
Good
became
on.
master of the hunt.
And governor of Burgundy, one of France's most important provinces.
You can see they were playing the long game, meticulously building their power base.
And it's almost like a soap opera, isn't it? Then there's Mary, Queen of Scots.
Ah, yes, Claude's niece. Her marriage to the future king Francis II. Now that was a power play of epic proportions.
Suddenly, the Guise family had direct links to the monarchy. They had immense influence over policy and decisions. No wonder they started attracting enemies.
Power always has a price.
Which brings us to the Amboise Conspiracy of 1560, a plot to overthrow the Guise, and it didn't end well for the plotters. But I've always seen the Protestants as the victims in this era.
That's a common perception. But Professor Stuart Carroll in his work challenges that idea. He highlights the emergence of Protestant political thought that actually advocated for removing tyrants.
Removing tyrants even through violence.
Potentially, yes. So were the Protestants plotting to overthrow the Guise because they saw them as tyrants? It adds a whole new layer to this story.
It does. So the Guise, while ruthless, were operating in a climate of fear and perceived threats.
Exactly. And these radical Protestant ideas, they contributed to the escalating violence and shaped how the Guise saw their enemies. It wasn't just religion.
It was a power struggle
Yeah.
with very high stakes.
Absolutely.
And this tension explodes with the massacre of Vassy in 1562. Francis, Duke of Guise, and his men slaughter a group of Protestant worshippers. Could it have been avoided? Or was this inevitable given the political climate?
It's a question historians still debate. Was it a calculated act of aggression, a tragic overreaction, or something in between? Legally, morally, it's a very complex event, but what's undeniable is that this massacre marked a shift from simmering tensions to all-out war. The French wars of religion had begun.
And these wars weren't a simple Catholic versus Protestant showdown, were they? Professor Carroll points out it was far more nuanced.
Absolutely, he emphasizes the intricate dynamics. Personal vendettas, shifting alliances, raw political ambition influencing people's actions. Even those who shared the same religion could find themselves on opposing sides. Depending on their interests, it really complicates the traditional narrative of these wars.
So less about religious devotion and more about who comes out on top.
Tragically, yes. Almost like a real-life Game of Thrones, just without the dragons.
And speaking of complex dynamics, let's fast forward to 1572, the event that sent shockwaves across Europe, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. Remember that marriage we mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
The one that was supposed to bring peace between Catholics and Protestants?
Oh, yes.
Well, things took a very dark turn. Thousands of Protestants killed. How much blame does the Guise family bear for this horrific event?
We need to separate the events of that day. There was an initial plot, likely orchestrated by Catherine de' Medici and involving the Guise, to eliminate the Protestant leadership. But no one could have predicted or controlled the widespread violence that followed.
So they may have lit the fuse, but the explosion was far greater than they anticipated.
It seems that way.
And the brutality of this massacre. It has disturbing echoes even in modern conflicts, doesn't it?
Yes, it's a stark reminder that ideological conflict and dehumanization, they aren't relics of the past. They remain very real threats, even in our own time.
It's chilling seeing those historical events and how they resonate, even today. But back to the Guise family. We can't forget Henry, Duke of Guise. He really emerges as a major player after that massacre.
He does, doesn't he? Forms the Catholic League in 1576, a force to be reckoned with, determined to protect Catholic interests and power in France.
It wasn't just a religious organization either, right? They had real political weight.
Oh, absolutely. And Henry, Duke of Guise, he had that nickname, Le Balafré, the scarred one.
It just adds to their almost mythical image.
It does, it does. But their main opposition, Henry of Navarre, a Protestant, next in line for the throne.
The Catholic League, though, they were vehemently opposed to him becoming king.
And that opposition, it ultimately led to the War of the Three Henrys. Confusing name, but a pivotal conflict.
It certainly makes things interesting, but were the Guise really driven by faith at this point? Or was it all a grab for power?
That's the question, isn't it? It continues to spark debate. Religious convictions, or using religion to advance their own ambitions?
It's probably a combination of both, I'd imagine.
Likely, yes. Remember, this is a family accustomed to power, to having influence. A Protestant king, that was a threat on multiple levels.
Religious and personal.
Mhm.
So they saw Henry of Navarre as a threat on multiple levels, which I guess makes their actions seem more calculated. But this War of the Three Henrys, it wasn't just a war of words, I take it.
You're absolutely right. Brutal, bloody, fueled by religious tension and the insatiable hunger for power. The Guise family's ambition, this is where it really peaks. Their maneuvering, their alliances, their enemies, it all comes to a head.
And this is where we find out if that relentless pursuit of power actually pays off. Did they manage to take control?
Ironically, their ambition led to their downfall. Remember how they effectively pushed King Henry III out of power in 1588? He never forgot that. Never. He saw them as a direct threat to his authority and, well, he took drastic measures.
Okay, this is where I get nervous. What happened?
He had them assassinated, both Henry, Duke of Guise, and his brother Louis. The ambition that fueled their rise, it sealed their fate.
Wow. That's Shakespearean, almost. They climbed to the very top, only to be taken down by the king himself.
It highlights the game they were playing. The French court, a hotbed of intrigue, betrayal. Even the powerful Guise, they couldn't escape it.
So the Guise dynasty is gone, but their impact, you can't deny it, they shaped French history. But what's their legacy? Are they villains, heroes, something in between?
That's the million-dollar question. They present a fascinating case study, that's for sure. The complexities of history. They were ambitious, ruthless, undeniably involved in some of the most brutal events of the 16th century.
But they were also products of their time, right? A world of religious tensions, political upheaval.
Precisely. And Professor Carroll brings up this concept of enmity in his work. It seems to have played a significant role, not just for the Guise, but for the entire era. It does make you grateful for peace, doesn't it? The peace we often take for granted. And while we can't condone the violence, studying the Guise family, it offers a glimpse into what shaped Europe back in the 16th century. A reminder that history, it's rarely black and white.
Even the most infamous figures, driven by complex motives, beliefs.
Exactly.
So where do we go from here? What's the takeaway? Are the Guise family villains? Victims? Or simply products of their time?
Professor Carroll, he offers a thought-provoking perspective. He argues that even the word quarrel, its meaning has evolved. Back then, it wasn't just a disagreement. It was deep-seated, all-consuming, rooted in religion, politics, honor. These quarrels could last for generations.
Fueling those cycles of violence, revenge, like those legendary family feuds we hear about, but with more at stake.
Exactly. And the Guise family, they were entangled in these quarrels. Hard to imagine them existing outside of that context.
Their actions shaped by the norms of their era.
Absolutely.
So you're suggesting they weren't inherently evil, but playing by a different set of rules. Rules that we might find appalling today.
I think that's a valid interpretation. Their actions, brutal by today's standards, but they were carried out within a system that, well, prized honor, loyalty, and, unfortunately, revenge. We have to judge them within that context.
While also acknowledging the lasting impact of their actions.
Of course.
It reminds us that history isn't just dates and events. It's about understanding the people who shape those events. But how can our listeners delve deeper? Where can they learn more?
Professor Stuart Carroll's book, Martyrs and Murders, The Guise Family, and the Making of Europe. It's brilliant. Not just about the family, but the whole context of 16th century Europe.
We'll definitely add that to our list. But before we wrap up, any final thoughts? Something for our listeners to ponder.
I think the biggest takeaway is the power of enmity, how it shapes individuals, families, even nations. It's a reminder to be mindful of our own biases, seek understanding rather than division.
And strive for a world where violence isn't the answer.
Well said.
A powerful message, one that resonates even today. And on that note, we conclude our deep dive into the House of Guise. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time.